All right. I have pushed the admit button and everybody is joining us. As you are logging in tonight, your cameras and microphones are off. Please continue to keep them off because it helps make the event run a little bit smoother. So I'm just waiting for a few more people to connect to audio here and then I will get started. Keep an eye on the waiting room while I'm going. Welcome everybody. I'm Carrie and I'm on the Anderson's events team. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, especially those of you who are here in Chicagoland with us. It's so nice to have a virtual option when the weather is absolutely horrible like it is outside right now. Pretty, but horrible. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to welcome you to our event with Douglas, Preston, and Lincoln Child. This is so cool for anyone who's a fan. I thank you all for being here. And I just wanted to let everyone know that the Andersons family has been selling books independently since 1875. So we've made it through some really tough times before. We're going to make it through this time as well. But we just can't thank you enough for your support of this event by attending tonight and of course by your purchase of the book through us, which allows us to remain in business. And we are just incredibly grateful for it after such a terrible 2 years. It's a really hard time to be a family-owned business, let me tell you. If you ordered a book for tonight, please know that you will receive an email when your books are either ready to pick up at the store that you chose or if they have been shipped out to you. And this can sometimes take a day or two because we have actual human beings who process those book orders and pack those up and ship them. We don't have cool robots like that big online place. If you have not ordered your book for tonight or you'd like another signed copy, because we do have signed copies for tonight's event, I'll be putting info on how you can do that in the chat with a link to order. So a couple more things really quick before we get started. As mentioned previously, cameras and microphones are off. Please keep them off for the duration of the event because we are all very tired of Zoom lag after the last 2 years, and that is the best way to keep it at bay. If you'd like to ask questions, though, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, which is always a lot of fun. So please submit questions at any time throughout the chat. I'm going to be collecting them while the authors are speaking to each other, and then I'll pop back on and I'll be feeding those questions to the authors on your behalf. So the earlier you get them in, the better. And the better chance that I'll be able to get through as many of them and pace ourselves so we can get through as many of them as possible. And we'll just be, getting through as many as we can by the end of the event before we are done for the evening. With that, I'm going to head and get to the good stuff. We are here tonight, of course, so amazing, with Douglas, Preston, and Lincoln Child, who stand head and shoulders above their rivals, according to Publishers Weekly. Some of Preston and Child's thrillers were chosen by readers in a national public radio poll as being among the 100 greatest thrillers ever written, with Relic being made into a #1 box office hit movie. They are co-authors of the famed Pendergast series, and their recent novels include Bloodless, The Scorpion's Tail, Crooked River, Old Bones, and Verses for the Dead. In addition to his novels, Preston writes about archaeology for the New Yorker and Smithsonian magazines, and Child is a Florida resident, aren't we all jealous tonight, and former book editor who has published 7 novels of his own, including such bestsellers as Full Wolf Moon and Deep Storm. The authors welcome visitors to their Facebook page where they post regularly. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, gentlemen, if you'd like to pop back on. Ta-da! The magic of Zoom. All right, I am standing by if you need me, but I'm going to go ahead and stop my camera and let you guys go.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very nice introduction. Well, I'm Doug Preston, and Lincoln is over there with the guitars in the background. And we're really happy to have you join us tonight. We're going to talk mostly about our book, Diablo Mesa, which is the 3rd book in the Nora Kelly, Corey Swanson series. It is a standalone novel, and we're going to talk about, and it was just published on Tuesday. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we got the idea for that book, and maybe we'll talk about how we work together and so on and so forth. Lincoln might say a few words about his solo novel, which is going to be published later on this year. And then we would love to get your questions. We enjoy very much answering the questions of our readers. So anyway, I thought we'd just start with where we got the idea from Diablo Mesa. And it sort of came out of the fact that Corey Swanson is recently graduated from the FBI Academy, and she was assigned to the Albuquerque field office, where she is engaging in her probationary FBI period. A new FBI agent is always has a 2-year probationary period before they become a fully fledged agent. So she's in this probationary period. And Nora Kelly is a curator at the Santa Fe Archaeological Institute. And Corey's specialty as an FBI agent is forensic anthropology. She's very good at reconstructing the faces of people who, when they find skeletons, when they find a homicide victim and there's not much left. She is the kind of person who can reconstruct the face and can do the dental identification work and that sort of thing. So the two of them pair up. And so in this particular book, we've always been looking for interesting ideas in New Mexico that they can cooperate on. And of course, one of the most notorious episodes in New Mexico history is the so-called Roswell Incident, where allegedly a UFO crashed in 1947 in a very remote area in eastern New Mexico. And so I had the thought that maybe we could build a novel around that. And I think it was Lincoln's idea that we start with a billionaire who is fascinated with UFOs, and he decides to undertake a careful and professional archaeological excavation of the Roswell site to see if there's anything there. Did something really crash, or what could have happened? And that's where we sort of started talking. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Lincoln to talk a little bit about how we bounced ideas back and forth and what we finally came up with.
Thanks, Doug. And I want to thank Carrie and all you out there who support us and support independent bookstores too. It means a lot to us. Although I've never lived in New Mexico, I lived in New York and New Jersey and here in Florida. I know that New Mexico is a great place for setting both Nora and Corey, because so much goes on there and has gone on. The history is amazing, and there's so many places. Doug told me once that the restricted airspace in New Mexico is like 40% or something like that. Isn't that right, Doug?
Yeah, there's something like 30%. Yeah, there's so many military bases and the White Sands Missile Range, Holloman Air Force Base, and of course, where the book takes place is the Roswell Airfield. That all this restricted airspace, there's just a lot of military activity in New Mexico, and quite a bit of it top secret. Of course, there's also Los Alamos labs where they develop the nuclear weapons, and there is Sandia labs where they're also doing classified nuclear research, and where allegedly nuclear weapons are stored in a mountain. Allegedly, nobody really knows. Those are the rumors.
One of the things we find with writing a book with a archaeologist and a FBI agent is that while Nora is out there excavating ruins, it could be 50, 500, 5,000 years old. We need a
Sorry, I just needed to get myself my little.
Clap your heels and say there's no place like home, Doug. That, you know, when Nora is discovering a lot of old mysteries, we still have to have a way to bring the story into the present so that Corey can do her thing with the FBI. And that was the case with Old Bones, the first collaboration with the two women, also Scorpion's Tail, and this book. Doug had the idea of, let's take Roswell, you know, the famous site, almost a cliche now, and turn it on its head, you know, and bring it into the, not just the 1940s, but the present day as well. And I said, okay, well, what if they go out there and instead of finding dead aliens, they find dead humans, which dovetails really nicely into the history of Los Alamos and the all the spying that went on during the early H-bomb research, which Doug can tell you about himself.
Yeah, so we thought, well, we have to. So what happens is when they begin this excavation of the Roswell site, the first thing they find are two people who were executed at close range, gunshot wounds to the side of the head, and their faces and hands have been obliterated with acid in an attempt to disguise their identity. And with them, they find a classified nuclear device, which was used in the very early H-bombs. Of course, the Manhattan Project developed the atomic bomb, but in 1947, they were already starting to research the idea of making a much more powerful bomb using hydrogen, a fusion bomb. And so this device is buried with these two bodies. So that's what brings Corey Swanson, the FBI agent, into the investigation. It becomes a modern murder investigation. And of course, the first thing she has to do is try to identify these bodies, which turns out to be very, very difficult. She does notice, though, that they do have dental work. And very strangely enough, the dental work has been done with stainless steel instead of silver or gold, which is a very important clue. And if any dentists are listening, they might be able to figure it out. But anyway, so that's sort of how it begins. Now, so Nora is roped into this excavation against her will. She feels that it's hokey. She thinks that the whole Roswell incident is bogus. It's already been shown to be has already been dismissed as just exaggeration and so on and so forth, no UFOs or anything. But she's persuaded to undertake this archaeological excavation for various other reasons, which we go into in the book, being financed by this billionaire named Lucas Tappan. So I don't think we can talk too much more about it without giving anything away, but suffice to say, this is not a hokey. We really tried to avoid hokey UFOs, alien autopsies and all that sort of thing. I mean, and I think that we came up with an idea that is I believe, very plausible and not hokey, and actually might be, in fact, the case. And no one has advanced this idea before. There must be 1,000 theories about what happened at Roswell, but no one, for some reason, had advanced this particular theory. So if you do read the book, I think you'll find out a lot about theories about the great filter, the Drake equation. There are all kinds of information in there about UFOs, about the possibility of intelligent life elsewhere in the galaxy, and what many scientists have tried to theorize about that. Why have we been contacted?
Right.
Are we going to be contacted, and so forth? So
one thing we faced when starting this book, as Doug alluded to, was how do we keep this from being a cliche? And people have seen the X-Files, E.T., etc. We didn't want, the moment that people read the words Roswell or Area 51, to think of, little green men, which is why we decided right from the beginning to have Nora a skeptic. In fact, she's so skeptical that she got fired rather than take on the assignment for this billionaire that he came to the Archaeological Institute with. And so, throughout the book, she remains skeptical. No matter what they find, it takes a lot before her armor is tipped away. It was a lot of fun for us. Last night, somebody asked us if we learned anything during the writing of this book. And I learned something very frightening, which Doug alluded to a minute ago, called the Great Filter, which I didn't know anything about. I think we all think about, well, not all of us, I mean, other than alien and creatures who burst out of chests we think of aliens being nice, cuddly, phoning home. But there is a theory out there. The reason that we've never been contacted by aliens is because there's like a ceiling, not a glass ceiling, but a titanium ceiling, or, where civilizations only get so far before they either blow each other up, in wars, or maybe there's a species out there who's waiting around, and it is a good idea for us to be sending out signals to people. Maybe it's not. And when I heard that, the great filter, I thought, oh my God, turn those things off right now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there is a group of people who believe that we're in a very dangerous situation, in the sense that, here we've been generating electromagnetic, radiation, radio waves and all the rest that is now spreading in a sphere that's a radius of about 100 light years, and that there might be some really bad guys out there in the galaxy who don't want competition, and they might, find out about us and decide to just stamp this little anthill out, or spray it with pesticide and get rid of it before we become a problem. And so these are serious scientists. These aren't crazy people on the fringe. They say, if you go into the forest at night, most of the animals out there at night are hunting. You don't want to be out there loudly, chirping away, attracting every carnivorous animal in vicinity to come and eat you. But that's sort of what we're doing. We're shouting out into the galaxy with our radio broadcasts and television and all this stuff. We're just putting it out there. Well, the wrong species might hear it and come looking for us.
That's one possibility anyway. We're not advocating that, but I learned that. And one thing that's great about writing novels is that you can learn a lot. We always try and choose subjects, whether it be engineering, like in Riptide, or Ice Limit, or archaeology, like Thunderhead, where Nora was first introduced, that interests us, or that we want to know more about. And we try and then filter that onto the reader. It's not like those historical novels you've probably read where the author clearly has said, I spent 2 years researching this, and you're going to get every last bit of research, crammed down your throat when I'm done with you. We try and filter that out and leave in just the interesting stuff. But, that's what keeps it fun for us, because we try and write books that we want to read. Otherwise, it would be just a job, and it's not a job for us. It's I don't know, it's an adventure.
Yeah, we love writing these books, and we also really enjoy working together. A question we're often asked at our book signings is, how do you guys work together? And it's an interesting question, because the way we work together has actually evolved quite significantly since the beginning. For example, when the first novel we wrote, Relic, Lincoln was maybe we should tell you the story of how we met, because that's sort of kind of interesting. At the time, this was back 30 years ago, no, more than 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And it was back in the 1980s, mid 1980s. I was working as an editor at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and I also wrote a column in the magazine. And Lincoln was an editor at St. Martin's Press. And he had the idea of commissioning a book, a history of the museum. And he started reading my articles in the magazine. He liked them. And he thought, oh, Preston is the right person to write this book. So he called me up on the phone, identified himself as a senior editor at St. Martin's Press. Sounded very distinguished to me. And he invited me for lunch at the Russian Tea Room, which is one of the fanciest restaurants in New York. Well, you can imagine At the time, I was making $9,000 a year working for the museum. So I had to go to Salvation Army and get a jacket just so I could get into the Russian tea room. And I arrived expecting to meet this distinguished elderly editor, but instead, here's a kid waving his arm at me. I mean, and that was Lincoln Child. He was even younger than I was. He was just a rising star at St. Martin's Press. So he asked me if I would write a book about the museum, and I did, and it was called Dinosaurs in the Attic. It's still in print. If you care to buy it, that would be great. But then when it was done, Lincoln asked me to give him a tour of the museum, of the back, of the parts of the museum that no one ever gets to see. And so kind of for fun, I gave him a tour at night after the museum was closed. They turned off all the lights in the halls and just put on the emergency lights. And so we wandered through the museum. We're not really supposed to, but finally at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, we ended up in one of the dinosaur halls. And Lincoln turned to me and said, "God, Doug, this is the scariest goddamn building I have in the world. We have got to write a thriller set in this building." And that's what we did. We wrote Relic.
And what happened then was it took us 8 years to get it published because, and this is another question we get asked all the time, how do two people write a novel together? Well, at the time, no publisher thought anybody could write a novel for somebody else. And so, they were talking about maybe using a pseudonym for us or calling us Lincoln Preston or whatever it would be. But it was interesting because Doug, writing all those columns that he did most of the writing of the first draft of Relic. And I did a lot of the editing back then, more so than now it's more 50-50 than it was. But he wrote a chapter early on in the book where two cops are investigating the first dead body found in the museum. And I, with my editorial hat on, I said to him, "Doug, these two cops are both, Irish New York cops, and you can't tell them apart. Can't you fold them into one character and give us a different guy for the second character? Someone who's not your typical Irish stereotypical cop." And he got very offended. He was quite touchy back in those days. And he said sarcastically, "Like what, an albino from New Orleans?" And I thought about that and I said, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Of course, Pendergast is not albino, but he's very, very pale. He has pale white blonde hair, and people always ask us where he came from, which of us invented him, and we always say he sprang out like Athena from the forehead of Zeus. One day he wasn't there, the next he was, and we knew right away we had something, and we piled on affectations and eccentricities onto him. The one thing we didn't know was that he would be our series character. He appeared again in Reliquary, the sequel, but then he vanished for like 4 or 5 books until Cabinet of Curiosities came out. And after that, he would let us go, or vice versa. And our next Pendergast book actually is called The Cabinet of Dr. Lang. So it's coming full circle back to the book that really made Pendergast's fortune, I think. Wouldn't you say, Doug?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Cabinet of Curiosities is really one of the best books that we've written, and many of our readers seem to agree. And we loved writing that book, and we really wanted to return to that Gothic, dark atmosphere. And so we found a way to do it. Now, those of you who've read Bloodless, the ending of Bloodless has caused consternation among our readers. They wonder, well, what's going to happen next? Because we left hanging a very important fact. Even though the story is resolved, we left hanging this one thing. Well, that one thing is now launching a trilogy. The next book is The Cabinet of Dr. Leng, and then there's going to be a third book in that trilogy. But it's really going back to the Cabinet of Curiosities environment and some of the same characters. And we are having so much fun writing that book. It is, you're going to love this book. It's really a good one. It's very dark and quite awful. And I really can't say anything about it except that nobody is safe in our books. That's what I can say.
Sometimes people think we write trilogies. We've written 2 trilogies before on purpose to keep people hanging, but that's not the case at all. It all started with Brimstone, where we told our editor, we can't finish this book in time. There's too much story left to write. And she said, I'm sorry, but you have to turn it in. You can't wait. And we said, well, can we, finish the story in the second book? And she said, well, yeah, if you find a way to end this one nicely. And so we did find a way to do it, but it took 2 books, not one, to finish the story that was started in Brimstone. So the same thing happened here. In Bloodless, we didn't intend for this story to run away from us, but we only have so much control over Pendergast, and beyond that, he does what he wants. And if we give him an inch, he'll take a lot more. And in this case, he got away from us, and Constance got away from us, and my God, we're in a real jam, and we love every minute. We love every minute of it.
That's right. That's right. So we're really enjoying writing this series now. The Diablo Mesa is the 3rd book in the Nora Kelly, Corey Swanson series, but each of those novels is a standalone novel, so you don't have to have read them in any particular order. And actually, I think this Diablo Mesa is a really good novel to begin with if you haven't read one of them yet. We think it's, we just really enjoyed writing it, and we've already got a 4th Nora Kelly, Corey Swanson novel in the works. We don't have a title for it yet. We don't really have a plot. We just have an idea, and the idea involves a twisted religious cult. But that's all I can say. So
I just saw a question from Lori appear asking if Vincent D'Augusta will ever return, and I'm glad to say that just today, Doug and I were plotting out a chapter involving him, because he is very much front and center in the next Pendergast book. D'Augusta has been on the shelf for too long because Pendergast went down south for 3 books, but he plays a huge role in the upcoming Cabinet of Dr. Leng. I say upcoming, but it's next January, alas, that is actually due out. But he will be back, Lori. So thank you for your interest.
That's great. I'm back. I always seem to scare people when I pop back in. I have a few questions for you guys, if you guys are ready. We've got a couple of great questions from the audience. Okay, great. That was fascinating. Thank you for that chat. Let's see. We went ahead and answered the yes. Okay. Do you guys ever get, first of all, actually, before I started, I want to tell you that one of our attendees tonight reached out to me and told me that she's joining us from Brisbane, Australia, which actually sets a record for Andersons. And we have been keeping track of who has logged into one of our events from the farthest place away. So congratulations, Wendy. That's so cool. It is also, she said, very nice there with blue skies and sunshine, which I can't relate to at this moment, and I'm jealous of. Because here in Chicago, it is very snowy and cold. Okay, so let's get into Ian's questions now. Do you guys ever get writer's block at the same time? And what do you do if that happens?
Well, we don't, it's funny. when we run into difficulties, this is one of the great things about a partnership is, we both write solo novels and sometimes we get stuck and there's nobody to talk to and you feel all alone and you just kind of struggle in silence. And that's tough. But when Lincoln and I are working together, when one of us gets stuck, the other one always has ideas. And, we can talk about it, we hash them out. Sometimes we argue, it gets the blood flowing, but we always work through it. And that's really one of the best things I think about our partnership. Lincoln is someone with tremendously good ideas, and I hope he believes the same for me. So when I'm stuck, when I'm stuck and I ask him, Link, what should we do? He'll come back sometimes right away, 30 seconds. Well, how about this? It's like, whoa, that's a great idea. So
the flip side of that coin is that now and then we have ideas that we are very fond of, and we're not so eager to hear the other person's idea. And then we have to sort out who is more right than the other one, or who has the idea. Perhaps it's better phrased as whose idea would be better for the book. And we usually sort that out by the person who yells the loudest wins. But we both know enough by this point, after 30 years of a partnership, that we have to leave our egos outside our writing garrets, and there's no place here for wounded pride or anything like that. And we should always listen to the other person, and luckily we trust each other's judgment, and that has always prevailed and kept us from storming off in a huff.
Yeah,
Kind of sounds a little bit like a marriage in a way.
well, it is, because we had to learn how to fight, just the way, you have to learn how to fight in a marriage. In the beginning, I remember when we were writing Riptide, we got absolute loggerheads over some fact. I can't remember what it was, but Lincoln was just totally enamored of his idea, and I was totally enamored of mine. And we just reached absolute standstill. And finally, the way we solved it was we said, okay, we're going to find a third way. We're going to throw out both of our ideas and we'll find a third way. And we did. And it was a good way. It was the best way. So
that's really interesting. That's a cool story.
That was I just want to add that was a nadir in our writing partnership, because there was a day when Doug said, maybe this isn't working out, and I hurled a long string of curses at him, very colorful, and there was a silence, and he said, well, I'm glad you got that out of your system. There were other times Doug has said, maybe I'm not cut out to be a writer after all, but that was the one time he speculated about maybe we should hang it up. But luckily we didn't. And as he said, we found out a third way out of it.
Well, lucky for us, you guys didn't. So glad you worked through that. Kind of along the same idea of working together. This is a good question. With you guys also now writing books on your own, how does that change your writing partnership at all? And what does that mean for future books?
Well, generally,
go ahead, Doug.
All right. Well, I was going to say that, generally, when it comes time for us to write books on our own, we have to sort of do it together, in a sense that, so Lincoln and I will both take some time off to write our own book, and that's how that works. But we often, it's a funny thing. Sometimes when we're writing a solo novel, one of us will get stuck and call up the other one and say, I'll call up Link and say, Link, I am really stumped here. What should I do? And I'll send Lincoln my manuscript, and he'll read it and say, oh, Doug, why don't you do this? It's like, yes. And in fact, for my novel, let's see, when was it? Tyrannosaur Canyon, Lincoln suggested the first chapter, and it's a really good chapter. And it was Link's idea, because I sent him the manuscript and he said, this is a great manuscript, but why don't you begin the book with this? And he gave me this idea. And then when Lincoln was writing Deathmatch, he sent me the manuscript, and I suggested to him the final chapter.
You wrote it. You
Well, I
wrote
wrote
the
it.
last chapter. Yeah.
Well, I was so excited by my idea, I wrote it and sent it to him. But anyway, so that's how we, that's the wonderful thing about our friendship, is that we can help each other even if it's not a joint novel.
That's really
And-
cool. I don't think I've ever talked to other authors who have that type of ability, like who have somebody that they can turn to like that, even when they are on solo projects. That's very cool.
Well, it's because we write together that we know that it makes writing solo books more lonely, like Doug said, and you don't know if that fork in the road you take is the right one or not necessarily, until 10 forks later you realize. And we've been spoiled in a way by writing together for so long, fiction at least, that we know what it's like to write both. And if it's your own book, of course, you can be very proud, and you can take the reviews and the criticism, as all your own. But again, it's not like there's somebody there in the trenches with you. You're there, and it's tough. It's very tough, or it can be fun but tough.
See that. How far in advance do you have novel ideas plotted out? So do you already know where the next novel will be heading when you are writing the current novel, or do you have an overall arc plan that's like several books out, or do you just kind of wing it?
Well, with the trilogies we write, we have an arc planned, more or less. I mean, it's very general, and there's a lot of detail that has to go in there. And often when we're halfway through writing it, the book takes a turn that's very unexpected. I mean, our characters are autonomous, and sometimes they do things that we don't expect, and they want to go somewhere where we didn't know, and we follow our characters. But generally, I'd say we pretty much plot one book at a time. And then when it comes to the next book, we sort of start from that point and go forward. But when we are writing, we do know where we're going with each book. Now, there's some writers out there who start a novel and they don't know how it's going to end. Lincoln and I pretty much know how a novel is going to end, and we know where we're starting. We may not be sure how we're going to get there. It's like standing on a mountaintop and looking out in the distance and seeing another mountaintop in the distance. You have to go there, but in between is the clouds and mist and jungle or whatever. You're not sure how you're going to get there, but you know that you have to climb that next mountain. So
That's great. So kind of along the same lines then, we had a great question about cliffhangers. Do cliffhangers happen naturally as you write, or do you plan them in advance and discuss them ahead of time? So do you know when you're writing it, like you plotted it out, that it's going to be a cliffhanger?
We're very careful, I think, to try and write our books at least once we got our feet wet. Like with Riptide, for example, and on. We try and write almost cinematically. Each chapter is a scene which ends in such a way that the reader is forced to keep on going. And nothing makes us happier than getting an email saying, "Damn you, I was up till 5 a.m. I had to keep reading." So in that sense, we try to write cliffhangers in a way that keeps people reading and keeps them on the edge of their seat. We don't intentionally write cliffhangers at the end of books. For example, looking back at our Diogenes trilogy, for example, now it makes a great, I say it shouldn't, but it makes a great read of 3 books. But back then, I feel sorry for the people who had to wait a year, or 2 for the whole story. But, sometimes, as is the case with Bloodless, it just happens that way. We usually don't say, okay, we're going to write a trilogy and Pendergast is going to die at the end. And no, that's a joke. And this will happen. We don't plan that out. That's something that our Pendergast and his merry band does. Bless you.
Thank you.
Does for us.
Okay. Oh, we had a question about Corey Swanson. What are the origins of Corey Swanson as a character?
Well, that Corey is a character that I'm particularly fond of, and she was introduced in Still Life with Crows, and in that novel, uh, Lincoln and I said, let's take Pendergast and put him in the most unlikely environment for him, the most an environment that's he's just sticks out like a sore thumb. And so we picked a tiny town in western Kansas called Medicine Creek. We put him down in there to investigate a really bizarre series of serial killings, apparently. And he really does, you know, he arrives and everyone in town is like, who is that dude? You know, he gets off the bus and the sheriff doesn't like him. And the town thinks he's, you know, what is he doing there? And then of course, Pendergast is, you know, goes into the local diner and he finds the food inedible and so, but we thought, you know, he needs a sidekick. And so we came up with the idea that there's this girl, she's a high school girl, who is, you know, her mother is an alcoholic, her father left the family, she's bullied at school, and she's really bright, she's really smart, and she's an avid reader, and so she really spends most of her time just reading. Although she gets herself into trouble because, you know, everyone's harassing her, so she fights back and gets into trouble. So Pendergast bails her out of jail, where she's been locked up for unfairly, and sort of hires her to chauffeur him around in her ugly, falling apart gremlin. And everyone in town is in consternation over Pendergast, you know, going around with this high school girl in this beaten up old car. But, you know, he becomes extremely fond of her. And they really develop a wonderful relationship. You know, she doesn't have a father, and he becomes a father figure to her. And so then he decides to take her out of that environment and send her to an elite private school in New England, which he does, and she succeeds tremendously there. She finally is in her element, and then she goes to the John Jay School of Criminal Justice in New York City, and then she goes to the FBI Academy. And now in this new series, she is this newly minted FBI agent. She still has a streak in her, a lawless streak in her, which she's really working hard to get rid of. But she has a very strong sense of justice, of what's right and what's wrong, almost too strong. And that's one of her characteristics.
Early on, I was not as enamored of her as Doug was, you know, in Still Life and White Fire. I think the first two books, she was really front and center, but I was always a bit leery about telling Doug my true feelings because he liked her so much. I was afraid that she was based on like a niece maybe, or a, you know, something like that, or a friend's daughter, and I'd offend him if I told him what I thought she was like. But she has grown up in recent books.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, in the original book, Still Life with Crows, you know, here we're writing about a 17-year-old teenager, and, you know, that's not a girl, and that's not, and she's a goth, you know, goth. And that's not a character that I knew a lot about, but I did happen to have a daughter who was 17 at the time. She's not a goth, but I asked her, I said, look, can you put together a playlist of music that Corey would listen to, and what would she wear for as far as clothing goes, and what kind of language would she use, what kind of slang would she use? So my daughter Celine put together this whole package of stuff for me that I went through. She had playlists for me. She had gone online. She'd gotten you know, pictures of what kind of clothing she'd wear and so on and so forth. And it was really great. It was very helpful in terms of research. And I think we really created quite a vivid character there. There were some people didn't like her at all, and others liked her a lot. So that's always a good sign.
She had a very good place in literature too. In one chapter, she's reading Beyond the Ice Limit, 10 years before the book was actually written. We like to teach people about that back in the day. But yes, Doug is right. He did a great job putting it together. And, that book was unusual for both of us because, we set this in Kansas in the middle of corn. Corn's everywhere. Everybody drives an AMC car. He mentioned the Gremlin because there's only one dealership of any kind of car within 100 miles. And there's corn everywhere. And it's so high and it's, claustrophobic. And then we were told later that they don't grow corn in Kansas. It's wheat. But, we didn't know any better. And it's our story. So, the hell with it.
They did in your story. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a great one. Trying to think how to phrase this without it being a spoiler. So you guys can kind of decide how you're going to answer. Are there any connections between the endings Impact, Deep Storm, and Diablo Mesa?
Yes, that's obviously a question by somebody who's deeply read in our books. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for reading our solo books too. You're on the right track. Yes. Whether or not we actually go as far in this book as we went in those two is something I don't want to give away. But you're very warm. You're very warm.
Yeah, it really deals with those three books deal with a subject that Lincoln and I are both very interested in, and it's a serious subject. The question is there intelligent life elsewhere in the galaxy? And now with recent research, we now know that there are 50 billion planets, of which maybe 8 or 10 billion are in the habitable zone, just in our galaxy. And it's really hard for us to imagine that we're the only intelligent life in this vast place. It seems quite logical that there are other that there are intelligent life in the galaxy, and possibly life that is far more advanced than we are. I mean, we've only been a technological species for a few hundred years. There may be species out there that have been technological for 1 billion years. Who knows? My God. So it staggers the mind when you think about it. And these are problems that Lincoln and I are very interested in. And of course, writers write about what they are interested in. So
I would expand Doug's answer to say, is there intelligent life out there? And if so, is it hungry?
This comes to us from Lori, who's tuning in tonight, and she is a third grade teacher. And she said today she told her students that she would be on this call. And they asked her, how do you write together? Which you've touched on already, but she wants to know specifically, like, does one person write one chapter and then take turns, or is everything truly collaborative?
It's truly collaborative in the sense that we talk about everything up front. We talk about the ideas for the next 10 or 12 chapters. We bounce ideas back and forth. We then outline the chapters and bounce the outlines back and forth until we know where we're going. We don't go so far as to, set things in stone. And then we assign groups of chapters to each other. And we're careful to assign sequences of chapters. A chase through a ruin, for example, or a series of chapters involving one person committing a crime, because we don't just write, Doug writes 1, I write 2, he writes 3. That would be very disruptive to the reader, I think. And then at the end, we roll a literary Zamboni over the whole thing and make it nice and slick, hopefully, so you can't see the seams. But that's the way that it works best. If we both know where we're going, and we then know we assign the chapters to the writer who is best suited for them.
That's actually really interesting, because I have to tell you guys, I feel like, and I'm sure others agree with me, you can't, this is the part I was the most curious about. You have two very different voices, two different personalities, but when you read the book, kind of like you said, you just run it over with the Zamboni to me. It really sounds like one voice. So I was always curious how you guys did that, because you can't tell, there are no seams, and I've always been curious how you guys go about that. So thank you for telling us that. This one is specifically for Lincoln. When is the new Jeremy Logan book being released? I saw it is sometime this year.
Thank you for your interest. I can finally answer that question. It's coming out July 12th, I believe. It's called Chrysalis. And like my earlier books, Deathmatch and Deep Storm, I try and place it 2 or 3 years in the future. So it's still a world we recognize, and it's not science fiction, but it's far enough where I can play with what happens a little bit. In the case of Chrysalis, it has to do mostly with virtual reality. And I've been writing this book for 6 years, so meta has nothing on me. And also with medical devices. And a certain talk I had with heart surgeons 5 years ago that horrified me. And the first thing I said was, oh my God, that's terrible. I have to work that into a book. And eventually I did. So thank you for your interest. Jeremy will be back in July. The book's done. It's just being copy edited at Random House now.
Okay, great. I actually just put a link to be able to pre-order it off of our website if anybody would like. And as it gets a little closer, it'll be added to our featured pre-orders list as well. I know that was on my boss's radar already, actually. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about movies, television, Hollywood. Will any more of your books be made into movies?
Well, yes, we hope so. First of all, my book, The Monster of Florence, is being made into a television series by Apple TV. So
oh, cool.
That will probably come out next year, perhaps. So that's one thing. And it turns out, I can't say anything about this because it's still in negotiations, but it looks like Diablo Mesa, the book we just published, is going to be made into a major series.
Oh, very cool. Very
So,
cool. Congratulations. I hope that goes through. Along the same lines, how about a Pendergast TV series?
Well, we're working on that too. That is that's a bit complicated because Paramount controls the Pendergast character. Even though he wasn't in the movie, they bought the rights to the book Relic, and so they effectively control the film and television rights to all the characters in Relic. So
even though he wasn't in the movie?
I know, isn't that crazy? But that's the way the contract reads, unfortunately. But we're hoping to work out with Paramount an arrangement whereby we can either free the character or they will do something with him. So we have high hopes right now that we're going to be able to work through that problem.
Believe me, that question about Pendergast is something that is rarely off our minds, day in and day out, as we watch other series on TV or see movies by our friends. So we're very, very eager. And I think we have a great character and great stories. And we hope that if there's justice in the world, we'll see him on the screen.
He's a great character. I hope he makes his way onto the screen. Marianne just wrote, Relic was not even close to being a good movie compared to the book being that it was so different. And I'm sure you can't say much, but exactly. I think a lot of fans feel that way. Okay, well, we're down to our last few minutes. So I'm sorry for anyone I didn't get to, but I did just want to ask a couple of just overall questions, really. First of all, your best short piece of advice for new authors trying to break into the business.
Well, I think that the important thing is, and it's a dumb thing to say because it's so obvious, you have to write every day. If you play the violin and you want to get to Carnegie Hall, or if you're a skater and you want to get to the Olympics, you've got to work every day at it, not 5 days a week and not 9, whatever. You have to work every day at it. and just keep going. And in order to do that with a writer is you have to get your loved ones to cooperate. One of the problems with trying to write is that a lot of times people don't think you're engaged in anything that's really serious. Now, if you were a neurosurgeon operating on the operating table, your friends and relatives wouldn't barge in or call you and say, "Oh, can you talk for a minute there?" But so you got to tell your loved ones to leave you alone. You have to have some sacred time to write, even if it's just an hour a day. They have to not bother you. So that's.
Uh-oh.
Look at that, a glass of champagne.
Wow, delivery.
Not that.
I'm sorry, his loved one is bothering him.
Yeah, I see that.
That
Hey,
was
loved
perfect
one,
timing.
loved one, can I have one too, please? Christine, where's mine?
Yeah, that's right. Just she'll pour it on the computer and
Okay. I would add to what Doug
Amazing.
said, that one piece of advice I would give you, because it helped me, is to take your favorite writer or the writer who inspires you to write and use them as a guide. Don't obviously plagiarize or mimic them, but what you like about their books, try and add that kind of those tools into your own toolkit when you're writing. And because you'll find that if you're writing a book that you want to read, you'll find it better than if you write a book that you're hoping will sell 1 million copies.
yeah, and I'll add to that. I had a friend who was a struggling writer. He was sort of a defense attorney and he didn't like his job and he wanted to write. And he sat down with The Eye of the Needle by Ken Follett, which is maybe one of the greatest thrillers ever written. And he diagrammed that book. He dissected it. He created this incredibly complex outline to the book and dissected it. And it was very useful, a very useful exercise. He was able to figure out why that book is so compelling and why the pacing in that book is so relentless. And then when he wrote his second novel, not his first, when he wrote his second novel, he got a $500,000 contract because he had really figured out how to do it.
Oh, cool. Ken Follett. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to close. Our time here is almost over. Actually, we're really right at the time limit. So I just wanted to ask really quick, because authors often get access to ARCs and stuff that for books that are up and coming. Have you guys read anything recently that maybe isn't out yet that you're excited about? And if not, if you just wanted to share something you've read recently that is out, that's fine too.
Well, I just read an ARC of a nonfiction book that was fantastic, called Born to be Hanged. And it's about
Born to be Hanged?
Born to be Hanged. Oh God, I can't even remember the author's name, and the book's in my office. I really apologize to the author, but I wrote a blurb for it because I liked it so much. But it's
good.
It's a true story about a group of English pirates who landed on the Isthmus of Panama in 1680, walked across Panama and stole ships on the other side and mounted the most audacious series of pirate attacks on ships and cities and towns on the Spanish coast of Central and South America, and captured tons and tons of silver. It was just a really wonderful story, and brutal, cruel, horrible pirates. I mean, it was awful what they did, but it's a really interesting story.
I just found it. It's by Keith Thompson and it comes out in May.
Perfect.
So I put the link in there if anyone wants to take a look, and you can always pre-order through us as well. How about you, Lincoln?
I'm drawing a blank. I don't want to mention books that I'm reading for research, which actually is taking most of my time right now because
that makes sense.
Give too much stuff away. But I find that I'll read an article in the New Yorker or someplace like that, and I find it's fascinating, and it's about a book that's coming out in 5 months or something, and it's so frustrating, because I have to put it on my my wish list at Amazon or something. But at the moment, I am trying to make my way through Proust. So forgive me if I
Oh.
seem a bit.
My Proust.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm suffering, like this, or what I've done to deserve
Little
this.
light reading.
Yeah. It may not come to pass, but Doug, I have a question. What the hell are you drinking?
It's
what
a
is that?
champagne.
What?
Champagne.
Oh, and here all I have is green tea. That's really.
My wife
Have
brought
boring
this-
old water.
Yeah, she knows that I'm about to conclude this really lovely evening, and she thought maybe I might need a little glass of champagne to celebrate. So
Such
I
a
raised
nice
my
glass
glass to
too.
you.
I'm impressed.
I inherited this from my great aunt.
Oh,
Isn't that nice?
that's neat. All right, well, with that, our time here sadly is coming to an end. And so I just wanted to take another minute to thank both of you so much for being here. That was really great. I know I'm getting lots of comments through the chat from people saying that they really enjoyed hearing you guys talk. So thank you so much for being here. And again, I know I say it a million times, but thank you to the audience for being here and continuing to support Andersons as we make it through this time with our virtual events. We are starting some in-person stuff next month. And so knock on wood, we're tiptoeing in and I hope it goes well. Besides that, just everybody out there, stay safe and be well.
Yes, and thank you so much for supporting Andersons and reading our books and showing up. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Be safe. And when you're in New York or Florida, keep a lookout for any book signings we might be doing, or Chicago too. You never know.
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for sharing.
Night.